All right, welcome to the Hudson Oven. This is Chase Arnett, founder and baker. I'm going to walk you through how to use the Hudson Oven's new real sourdough starter infused bread brick. So what you're going to need is one of our bread bricks, yes of course. You're going to need a standard size loaf pan, between 3.5 inches wide and 7 inches long, and 4.5 inches wide and 9 inches long, anywhere in there. You're going to need a pat of butter, or your favorite oil of some sort, olive oil or canola oil, just to lubricate the pan so that way your dough can come out easily when it's fully baked. And you're going to need a bowl for mixing. You're going to need a towel or a cloth for covering the bowl when there's dough rising in it. You're going to need a pair of scissors for opening your bread brick, and you're going to need a measuring cup so that way you can control how much water you're adding to the mixture. All right, we're going to start by opening the bread brick. We're going to just cut the label off because that has the directions on it, so we can refer to it later. And all you're going to do is open the top of the bag. So once that's open and sitting on the side, we're going to leave it there, and we're going to add our water now. We're going to take our water. We're going to measure 1.5 cups because we're making the bread dough. So just take it nice and slow. You can go a little over. I wouldn't say you'd want to go under 1.5 cups though. This all has to do with hydration, and a nice, 80% hydrated dough is nicer to work with. Okay, perfect. We can set that aside now. We're done with the measuring cup, although I would keep a little bowl of water nearby for reasons I'll explain in a second. So I'm just going to actually break this flour brick up in its pack. It's a little bit cleaner to do it inside the bag that it came in, and that's just a good start to getting it fully blended in with our water. So we're going to dump it in to the water bath and not use both hands, because as soon as you get both hands covered in dough, the golden rule is that you develop an itch on the tip of your nose. So I'm just going to focus on using my dominant hand, which is my right. I'm going to sort of just start blending it in. Don't worry about splashing or losing too much. However, at the end of this process, your hand will be nicely covered in dough, and you want to get as much of that off your hand as possible. This is a recipe. Although it seems very simple, there's a certain flour quantity and a certain water quantity. So we want to keep as much of that as we can, so that way we have a nice sized loaf of bread in the end. So sort of wiping the dry bits off the edges of the bowl as you go, and it should become pretty cohesive pretty quickly. The idea here is, think of it like a bowl of Cheerios. You have a dry bowl of Cheerios and you add milk, and for the first few minutes it's nice and crispy and crunchy. And if you let it sit for a while, it gets soft and sort of becomes kind of like porridge if there's not enough milk. Think we want to make soggy cereal right now. So we're just blending in the dry flour, which is full of bran and germ and endosperm, all the parts of the wheat seed, and we're going to let that get to know the water. Speaking of water, I'm pretty much about done with mixing. That was very quick. So I'm just going to wet my non-dominant hand, and when it's wet, it basically just makes it easier to pull the dough off, and it doesn't stick to that hand as bad. So just wet your fingers. Try to get as much off as you can. Get it in the dough and get it in the bowl. And that's pretty much what you want left. Remember, the more dough you can keep in the bowl, the bigger your loaf is going to be in the end. So now I'm just going around, and already I can feel that there's structure beginning to develop in the dough. Making sure if I see any little dry bits, I just sort of break those up. And now we have a nice cohesive mass in the middle of the bowl. The next step is to take our dish towel, place it over top of the bowl, and we're going to let it sit here for the next 30, 40, 50 minutes or so, till it just starts to rise a little bit and becomes a little bit more cohesive, as I was saying. The next time you visit it, if you take note of while you were mixing, it's really shaggy. The goal here is the next time we take the towel off, we can sort of feel the development of structure. The gluten is developing, and that's through our sourdough starter that we have incorporated in the mix, as well as the yeast. So we're going to come back here in 30 minutes and check in on the dough. I'll see you then. All right, you may notice that this is a different bowl. Just don't mind that. And also the dough is a little bit shaped already. So basically we're going to commence as if you just had that first 30 minutes of resting in the bowl. And all you're going to do is wet your hand, keep that bowl of water around, and you're going to reach under the dough, stretch it outwards, and stretch it over top itself. And you're going to repeat that. Rotate the bowl, don't move your hand, just keep doing the same thing in the same place, get into a nice rhythm, and just rotate it over top. And this is developing gluten strength. We're going to use that gluten strength to get a nice rise, something that rises up and past the top of our bread loaf pan. So basically we just did that, once. We went around probably twice there, and we're gonna let it sit in the bowl once again for another 35 minutes. We're gonna be really sure that we have enough gluten strength. So we're just gonna cover it up and start that timer again for 35-40 minutes, and we'll come right back. Now next time we visit this dough, we're gonna need an empty wine bottle, which I'm sure you have laying around. And if you have a little bit of flour, it would really help the process. All right, we're just gonna flour our work surface a little bit here. Don't be afraid to make a little bit of a mess. It's not a big deal. It's just flour. Just flour. Get your hands dirty. All right, we're gonna reach in and separate it from the bottom of the bowl. The quicker you move and the more aggressively you move with dough, the less it sticks to you. All right, now that it's down on the surface, or on the surface of your works, now that we have it nice and floured and it's on our work surface, we're gonna stretch it to about the width of our bread pan. Just a little bit less, because as we roll it out with this wine bottle, it's gonna naturally stretch vertically and horizontally at the same time. We want to just make a nice long rug. Think red carpet. Like the Hollywood red carpet. We're going to stretch it out. So right now we're just creating a nice long sheet of gluten. Now we're going to make that gluten work for us. And we're going to roll it up. So starting with the end away from you, we're going to roll it back towards ourselves and stretch it out. The more tension you can create during this process, the better. Sort of rolling that web of gluten up, keeping it all within a reasonable length this way. And finally, we're going to stop with the end of the roll being on the bottom here. We're going to take our bread pan, we're going to take our wad of butter and generously apply it on the interior of the sandwich loaf tin. All right, we have a nice greased pan, and now we're just going to pick it up in one smooth motion and plop it into the bread tin. So remember, you want the seam side down. So now we have this really nice tight bundle of gluten that's been stretched over the top and rolled together, and now this has the opportunity to rise upwards while those gluten strands are holding it within the borders of this bread tin itself. So hopefully we're going to get that nice vertical rise, and it's going to get a little bit of a sort of mushroom cloud effect, which is that standard sandwich loaf shape that we all think of when we think of a nice loaf of bread. All right, guess what we're going to do again? Yes, we're going to wait. So if you wanted to help along this process, you could pop your oven on, just turn the gas on to the electric and heat it up just slightly and shut it off, and that's a good proofing temperature. But this garage is nice and warm, so we're going to let it sit in here for, this is the longest time we're going to be waiting, about an hour and a half to 2 hours. We're going to let this thing rise just to come up about 2 inches, inch and a half, 2 inches over the top of this. Right, I'm sure most of you don't have a commercial Blodgett convection oven in your kitchen, but that's okay. I've practiced this many times in the home kitchen, and it's about 40 minutes at 380 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to just place it in the center rack here. At this stage in the fermentation process, the dough is very delicate, and it can degas very easily. So if you were to drop this onto a counter or throw it somewhere or sort of like toss it into the oven, those bubbles would start to release their air and you would get basically degassing and deflation of the dough. So we want to sort of trap all those air bubbles in place, heat it, and then freeze and harden all of that gluten around the air bubbles. So that's what gives us a nice fluffy crumb. So we'll be back in about 35 minutes, and I'll check in. This one bakes a little sooner, a little quicker, but remember, 35 to 40 minutes in the home convection oven at 380 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, one little trick I'm going to do right now is about 25 minutes in, pull the loaf out of its pan, and I'm going to set it in just bare without that, so I can crisp up that underside, the part that was inside the bread tin itself. We'll let that sit for the remaining 10 minutes. Okay, I'm pulling out the second loaf. I'll let this one go a little bit longer just because I like a nice dark crust. And there's your size. Nice little oven spring. Nice height. We can always do better, but this is a great start. Sound check shows and presents that it is a finished loaf of bread. So now we just need to let it cool for the next hour, just like the other one, and then we can do a little cross section, cut into them, and start to explore the flavors of sourdough and the flavors of the Maillard that we were able to achieve. All right, that sums up the process for turning a brick into bread with the Hudson oven. You know, practice makes perfect, just like anything else, so order another brick. All right, we'll see you next time, and hopefully we have some new recipes that we can start developing and get you making some other interesting types of bread. All right, this is Chase Arnett with the Hudson Oven, signing off. See you next time.